And
So,
that specific podcast was really born out of I was working a lot with HOA managers and their ponds in their communities, and they don't
Oh,
know a lot about
oh
it.
yeah.
And they get calls all the time from everybody in the community about the fountain or the algae or the plants, but it's usually like not good calls. And an HOA manager is really in charge of so many different things within the community that if I could take one thing off their plate that I'm the expert in, that they don't have to be the expert in, that's really what it was designed for. So something that they could listen to, shorter clips, just to kind of get some of that education out there. And then I did have some managers actually on the podcast sharing their thoughts with managing water and communities like that.
Hey there, welcome to the Stormwater World Podcast. Shout out to our parent company, Digital Stormwater. We're out there making an impact in stormwater one click at a time. We put more stormwater people in front of your stormwater products and services. How we get there is totally up to you. Some of the services that we offer are social media management, Google, LinkedIn, and Meta ads, SEO and content creation, website builds and updates, AI automations, consulting, and a lot more. So the question is who do you know that needs our help? If you're on YouTube, you can click on that QR code to learn more, or you can give us a call at 844-451-2534, or you can visit us at digitalstormwater.com and schedule a call with us today. I'd like to thank everybody that's been listening to this podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you. Let's get back to the episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to a new episode of the Stormwater World Podcast. I'm excited about this episode. We got a couple of firsts going on here, at least one first for sure. You may recognize or notice the voice when you hear her, but my partner in crime and in life and in the co-founder of our agency and all things. We do everything together. We're like just one person. My wife, Mariella Begley, is here today with us as a co-host. And I'm excited to have Miss Sonja Wixsom with us as well as our guest. Sonja had reached out to Mariella and had some kind words to say about the podcast. And so we were like, hey, you want to come talk? And she did. And so we're here today. Sonja, welcome to the pod.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And let's give you a little intro. Sonja earned her Master's of Science in Lake Management in 2019 and has since been making her way around the U.S. to advance her career. She was born and raised in upstate New York, moving to Dallas, Texas to pursue her first career in pond and lake management. Eventually, she moved on to become an operations manager for a stormwater company out of the Carolinas and is now a lake manager in Minnesota and Wisconsin. The diversity of her work history allows for Sonja to have a well-rounded approach to working with clients, communities, and the freshwater industry to improve management options and science communication. Cool.
Yeah.
So what's all of that mean? So let's talk about stormwater and lake management. What's right out of the gate.
Yeah.
What's the top thing on your mind?
So just from hearing, that great introduction, communication is such an important part of everything that anybody does. No one knows what you're doing unless you're communicating about it. And lake management is definitely one of those topics that when you say you're in lake management, people are surprised. They're, what does that mean? Or I didn't know that that's a area of service or of education, but it's just like everything else in the environmental field that if you don't manage it, things can go really wrong.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. And so why the move? Is that recent? Is it a recent move up to
Yeah. So I was
Minnesota?
in Carolinas all of last year and then into this year. And then I got an opportunity to pursue what my master's is all about, lake management, and with a really great team at TIGRIS Aquatic Services. So I got an opportunity to make a change and to start managing lakes in addition to ponds and stormwater services, just because that's what my passion is. And there weren't too many lakes where I was in North Carolina or in Dallas, Texas.
What? Yeah, well, there's plenty of lakes right in Texas. It's just you would have to. That's just a terrible commute from lake to lake to lake to lake.
Well,
Right?
and there's only what they say one natural lake in all of Texas, and the rest are man-made. So it's a lot
Oh, I
of,
didn't even know. I didn't even
hmm
know that. Oh, that's very interesting. All right. So take us through. By the way, Mariela, would you like to say hello to everybody? Because you know it's me, so I just totally started to run over the top of the podcast.
Hi, everybody. This is Mariella Begley Gorman, co hosting with Ty today.
um, can you take us through like what's the day in the life like of as far as lake management in terms of stormwater, and like you got some projects you're working on, or just
yeah.
I mean,
So
I'm not familiar with. I mean, I know it, right? It affects lakes, but I'm not familiar with your world specifically, right?
yeah, so stormwater looks very different than lake management. And so now in the lake management space, you're working more with clients, end users, or like groups, like districts, like associations. It's not usually one owner of that lake. It's multiple different stakeholders. Sometimes it's multiple different counties, depending on where the lake's located and how big it is. But it's usually those conversations start because they need something. They're coming up against some struggle, whether it be water quality or invasive species, or they want their fisheries to work, or they have harmful algal blooms. So they come to lake managers with problems that they need help with. And then it's usually a relationship building, going back and forth, talking about the problems, what they've done in the past, and what they're willing to consider to get to the end goal of what they want their lake to be or be used as. So it can really vary widely, especially up in the north, depending on the time of year, because it's frozen for most of the year, and then the summer opens up, and everybody's out in the field crazy busy. So there is a lot of ebb and flows between what's happening on a daily, but usually on a daily basis you're out in the field performing treatments or surveys or meeting with clients, and then you're also writing management plans or putting together a management strategy that will work for them. If that makes sense.
So I'm going to interject real quick because, like you said, people don't know what lake management is. You tell them you're in lake management, and they're like, "What's that?" So same thing with stormwater, and we do like stormwater 101. What is stormwater, and why do you care? So, what exactly is lake management?
So
What does it mean to be a lake manager?
yeah, lake management in general is management of freshwater resources for future uses. So that could be ponds, rivers, streams. It's typically lakes, but the differences between lakes and ponds are really blurred. It's usually like a 10-acre plot, but it's managing all aspects in and around the lake for sustainability and restoration for health. So that can
You know,
include invasive species or algal issues or, fisheries, the things that I mentioned before, all kind of go into that. And sometimes it's just managing people and expectations of what their water body can support.
so
Thank you.
I think it's interesting. It almost feels like, so do you feel like there's a disconnect between the stormwater and lakes?
I
Even though
do.
like I feel like that's the whole stormwater industry. We're not the whole industry. So don't come at me in the comments. But the like we're discharging to bodies of water, of which I assume a lot of the times it's a lake.
Hmm.
So like how can there just be this disconnect between the lake and then the upstream or the outfalls that are discharging? But yet you feel like there is a disconnect, right?
I do.
That's wild.
It is. Growing up in upstate New York, I've never heard of stormwater before, even throughout my undergraduate and graduate experience. I still had
Wow.
never learned about stormwater. It says it in the books or when you're studying. I understood it as drainage ditches, basically. When it rains, you can see water clearly flowing and you know where it goes. It goes
Right.
into stormwater devices. But it wasn't until I started working as an operations manager that I understood that there are a lot of different control measures that if they're not maintained and they fail, that could directly impact, waters downstreams and lakes and things like that. And I do see it as being totally separate fields, just from conversations I've had at different events and different conferences I've been to. I've been told before that they wouldn't consider ponds as lake management or stormwater ponds as lake management. But then when you go to the North American Lake Management Society page, it does say in the first sentence, like a lake manager is anybody that manages ponds, lakes, and stormwater systems. So,
the word detention or retention in front of it, just it changes it. It's over. No
yeah,
longer, it's no longer a real pond. We only deal in real ponds as lake managers. But I mean, I don't know. That's are you
I
guys
can kind of
respond? Go ahead, babe.
I can kind of see it because especially with detention ponds because they're supposed to be dry most of the time. But you do have to manage what is in it, what comes into it, and what goes out of it.
I have been on the side of a road next to a gas station talking about, this is a pond with some guy who was just buying a drink at a gas station. He was like, "Oh my gosh, are you gonna make that into a pond?" I'm like, "Well, it's already a pond." He's like, "Great, where's the water?" Like, "Well, it's a dry pond. It's not really the same thing," because I was driving a truck that said pond on the side of it. So he was, you know, and some communities want wet ponds even though they're supposed to have dry ponds, and they'll plug risers and
Yeah,
everything to get wet ponds because that's what they wanted.
yeah. It makes them feel like they have waterfront property if it's a wet pond.
Absolutely. And if somebody sold that to them as being a pond, then they feel like they're entitled to that. Maybe it had rained or it wasn't functioning properly when they first moved in and there was water. And then when there's not water, then you get calls about why there's no water.
If we would start using smart ponds, here's my soapbox for the next 10 seconds. Then everybody could have the best of both worlds because the smart pond could, you know, see around the corner when the rain's coming and it could reduce the volume of that pond closer toward a drier status. And then you would still have your volume for the rain and the flood mitigation. So then all the people that were like, hey, really want a wet pond? Hey, why is the water in my house? They'd be okay. We could satisfy that same person for both of those things, right? Because like we try to tell you it wasn't supposed to be a wet pond. But anyways,
But I think it
there's my
costs
10-second
more.
pitch for smart ponds.
I think it costs more to
Oh,
manage
uh,
a wet pond than a dry pond, just with
It
oh
cost
yeah,
does.
of
Yeah.
labor and chemical.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's got to be a lot more moving parts, I would believe. Well, not a lot more, but it's
Well, it
gonna.
costs more to design it. Put on my civil engineering hat. It costs more to design a wet pond, and it costs more to maintain it. Absolutely, because you have to make. You want to have a nice pond. You don't want to have a puddle of stagnant water sitting there with all the problems that come from that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
You got me looking stuff up here while we're talking. So you want to talk a little bit? Did you say you currently work for Tigris USA? Is that?
Yeah, I work at a company called Tigris. The tagline is where waters thrive, as well as people.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they are newer to the market. It was a merger of a couple different lake management companies on the East Coast, and then we've been acquiring and growing, and they have set out to, try to build the team of the best in the industry. And I was really blessed to be one of those people that they saw me in a position and offered me something. So yeah, I made that move, and we do pond and lake management, wetland services, stormwater management, and infrastructure. So our Georgia and North Carolina offices are focused more on that stormwater because it's such a higher prevalency there. And I'm teaching clients up here about stormwater because that's not something that compliance is as stringent as the North Carolina systems.
What town? What town are you in?
My office in Minnesota is out of St. Cloud, but I am
Okay.
in contract right now to buy a house in the center of Wisconsin. So I cover both all of Wisconsin and Minnesota for um, for pond and lake management as well as stormwater services. I don't know if you want to edit
Gotcha.
that out.
No, there's a good regional show if you don't have it on your radar, if you haven't already been. It's in February, but I mean, you're already used to the cold at this point, I guess. I don't know. Have you been through yeah, have you been through your first winter up
Not
there yet?
here, but I was born and raised in upstate New York, so it gets pretty
Oh, upstate. That's
chilly.
right. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. Oh, yeah, yeah,
I've been
yeah,
in the
yeah, yeah.
South for a
It'll all
couple
come
of
back.
years, so we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. It'll come back to you, no problem. But no, there's a good show that you might want to put on your radar called Mika. Are you familiar with Mika? Minnesota
No.
Erosion Control Association. Um, but they cover the basis across stormwater um, pretty well. Um, and I think, um, yeah, I think you should put in an abstract and just see if you can talk about, you know, lake management.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Have
absolutely.
that
yeah,
connect those dots between lake
yeah. I think
management and stormwater.
yeah, right there in your backyard. And then yeah, Roberta, I think Roberta's still managing that. I can, I can do an introduction for you. Um,
Yeah, that'd be
send out
great.
some emails and do an introduction for you so you can check that out. But yeah, that'd be cool. And then while we're doing shout outs, we just shout out to Tigris USA. Mariella, did you want to do a shout out for our guest for her podcast?
Oh, yeah. So let's try out her podcast. So Sonja has a podcast called That Water Girl.
That
Is
pond
that
girl.
right? That Pond
And
Girl.
girl.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I, I was listening to it. I was trying to remember exactly what it was called. So that Pond Girl, which you started when you were living in Dallas.
Hmm.
And taking a little hiatus. We'll be coming back hopefully soon. But talking about what pond management is, what lake management is, and how stormwater connects to that.
And
So,
that specific podcast was really born out of I was working a lot with HOA managers and their ponds in their communities, and they don't
Oh,
know a lot about
oh
it.
yeah.
And they get calls all the time from everybody in the community about the fountain or the algae or the plants, but it's usually like not good calls. And an HOA manager is really in charge of so many different things within the community that if I could take one thing off their plate that I'm the expert in that they don't have to be the expert in, that's really what it was designed for. So something that they could listen to, shorter clips, just to kind of get some of that education out there. And then I did have some managers actually on the podcast sharing their thoughts with managing water and communities like that. Just because I think it's a really demanding job and they need to be an expert in a lot of different things. And we just want them to make the best decisions when it comes to their stormwater, but they don't know it's stormwater. To them, it's a pond and or a lake, depending on who you ask. So trying to make those connections.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. Yeah, that's kudos to you for taking that on with HOA folks.
Well, the
HOA
managers.
manager, HOA managers, like you said, that's a really tough job. HOAs cover everything that developers don't turn over to local governments. So, and that can be a lot different from subdivision to subdivision, development to development. But pond maintenance is always part of the HOA's responsibility, and nobody understands what it means.
And they don't understand what it means until it's becoming a problem, and then it's an expensive
Yeah.
problem. And usually, when a community is first built and it's first handed over to the HOA, there's usually not that many problems. It's a fresh pond, doesn't have a lot of nutrients in it. And then, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, they're really in some trouble. And then there's the big dredging word that nobody ever wants to talk about because that's a lot of money and it takes a long time, and their HOA dues and reserve study money isn't usually enough for that unless they know ahead of time, like 20 years earlier, to start saving.
So one thing that you'll hear on a lot of the podcasts that Ty does is the dirty word in stormwater is maintenance. Nobody ever wants to talk about maintenance. And pond maintenance is so important. Annually, regular basis during the growing season, making sure those ponds stay clean and function properly. So huge shout out to you for putting that information out, working with the HOA managers, trying to educate them. And hopefully some more of them will hear about it and listen to that and gain that knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when I did that when I was in Dallas, and then when I moved to North Carolina, I learned a lot more about stormwater because I was in charge of the maintenance program in Charlotte. And that was, I had never been under a parking lot before into an underground pond. I mean, I
Oh
I was in
man,
charge of doing a lot of that different stuff. And
nice.
um, I will remember those experiences forever. I think that it makes me a more well-rounded and better professional in the field having done that.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure, 100%. Well, on that same topic, that's a great segue with the new company, or I guess we could just go over the course of the career because probably got some good Carolina stories. But you got a good challenge? Like, what was your biggest challenge that you ran into? Or you got any crazy stories that you want to share? I guess it
Man.
doesn't necessarily have to be a challenge, but like, I don't want a bow and a ribbon. I want like something that was like, yeah, to get your hands dirty.
Oh, I was dirty very often. Um,
any anytime you go under a parking lot, you're dirty.
And I was very excited to start doing that. We did our safety talk. I learned about the tripod and belaying people down and bringing them back up and the gas meter and all of these things that I had never used before. Um, and then when I was responsible for human life and these young kids that were working for me, I think one that really enjoyed being underground was only 19. But I was in charge of them underground. And so sometimes I would be the tender at the surface and sometimes I would be down there with them. Um, but I remember one time this younger guy that we call Nature Boy brought out, I don't know, 15 different bullfrogs from an underground device. And he climbed the ladder with all of them in his arms and he just set them all on me because I was sitting by the manhole, like handing things up and down. But that sticks out in my mind. But there was a lot of harder, longer, hotter, dirtier days in the Carolinas for stormwater than I've ever experienced before. And I was born and raised on a farm, so I'm used to dirty and hard work, but stormwater was definitely something else. And my biggest triumph, I think, was fountains and aerators actually in those stormwater devices in the ponds because I don't know much about electricity, but I learned a lot that summer.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
nothing like learning electricity in conjunction with water at the same
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
Like,
And you're
and I
in
mean, I can't,
waders and you're
yeah,
pulling them out,
yeah.
and these fountains are 80, 90 pounds, just the motor part of them, not even the attachments. Yeah, it was a lot.
I think that's great that you got the field experience to go along with everything else. So, in transitioning over to your new position, have you had a chance to run across any cool projects or any cool stories with what you've got going
Yeah,
on the
so
lakeside now?
because this is newer for me, I think I got hired in March and then I moved up here May, June. So this is my first like
Got you.
season summer here. And a
Hmm.
lot of the sales cycle happens before that. So the conversations, the planning kind of has already happened. So I have been out doing the physical labor of the summer with surveys and large lake treatments. I mean, I wasn't even certified or licensed to be an applicator, so I just went for an extremely long boat ride for a day because I wasn't technically allowed to touch any chemical or drive the boat because it dispensed the chemical. So I just got to
Oh, wow.
chat with my team and that day, actually, both Department of Ag and the DNR came out to watch the treatment just to make sure everything was good. Sometimes communities will ensure that their lake management company is doing everything correct and will call those resources out to site. So it was fun to be able to talk to them and that was right after I'd taken my test, but I haven't gotten my card in the mail. So technically I wasn't, allowed to help. And if I had touched any of the chemical or the boxes, even washing the containers afterward, that would have been a hefty fine per violation.
My gosh, that's like
Mhm.
that's my worst nightmare.
Hmm.
That's I can't sit. You're gonna just sit me. I gotta sit here the whole time. No,
Hmm.
I couldn't do it. I would have got us. I got us fined.
So I
I mean,
took
you
pictures
just
and videos
yeah.
for the
Oh,
marketing
that's good.
stuff,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Maybe I could
Perfect.
have done
Perfect.
that.
But I
Oh
have
my
been a
gosh.
part of a lot of different meetings, lake association meetings, and I've been able to use my expertise on what I've seen and what I know to recommend, different strategies or monitor needs to decide what we'll need to do in the future. So I'm excited for the next full year where I'll get to, set up my own projects and be more in the field.
So, what's the most common issue that you find um, in lakes and ponds that you have to deal with? Or is there something that's like, does it change region to region?
It does change region to region. However, as a national issue, water quality and harmful algal blooms have really risen to the top of, if you look at the agenda for most of the conferences that are coming out, there's always sections on water quality, harmful algal blooms, aquatic invasive species. The area that I'm in specifically is a lot of aquatic invasive species, and it's primarily Eurasian water milfoil, curly leaf pondweed, starry stonewort, and then some of the mollusks issues with
Uh,
invasive
oh,
species.
so what were you guys treating for? Like what kind of chemical were you? What were you treating for that day that you got to just take pictures?
Yeah, so that day was Eurasian
We
water milfoil, which is a
okay.
really voracious invasive species um, that's all over the US, I'm pretty sure. And it is very costly to address. So either you can treat invasive species in different groups, like a whack-a-mole approach. Chemical is
Mhm.
expensive, so depending on how many grants are available and how much funding the lake group has, really depicts what they can do for management. However, for this Eurasian water milfoil treatment, it was the entire lake. So I believe that treatment was 200 acres, which is a pretty large treatment. And that was with a chemical called Percellacor, which, in my opinion, is the top of Eurasian water milfoil treatment strategies. It
Okay.
can be expensive. Only certain companies and certain stewards of water can apply that chemical. So not every lake management company is going to bring that option to you for Eurasian water milfoil. And if they don't, then you can ask them about it, and it's probably an indication that they're not approved to use it.
Well,
So
what's the offset on something like that? Like I had never thought about that. So I assume that invasive species is just choking out everything else, choking out the plants and killing the fish because the fish don't have the right things to eat, changing the whole ecology. But then, so then we're entering a chemical into the water. So now I mean, so then my mind automatically goes to like the buzzword, right? All the forever chemicals and PFAS. Like so,
yeah.
are we fighting fire with fire? Like so, what's the offset? Like, does that thing literally just attack that invasive species and then dissipate, or
Yeah,
how's that work?
it's very selective, that chemical specifically. So there are different groups of herbicides, and there's some that are contact herbicides, which means, they only have to make contact really quickly and they can only affect what they touch. And then there's systemic herbicides that travel throughout the plant. So that's something that needs a little bit longer in the water and it goes down to the root. But this chemical itself specifically only attacks just the Eurasian water milfoil. And in general, lake management isn't just about chemical, that's one section of it. But for some of these invasive species, that's like the most effective treatment and the effective strategy, as well as prevention is always, the easiest, the most cost effective, preventing things before they get in the water body. And a lot of people worry about herbicide use. There are quite a few people that are against it. However, I don't think that they realize that these chemicals go through very rigorous EPA testing and registration that takes 10 to 15 years for it to be approved for use. And then even then people are like, well, I don't really know what the data is on that. It's like, well, there's been like 10 to 15 years of data that's made it so that it can actually be used in these approved sites. And that's like language on the bottle needs to be updated and approved, as well as like all the directions for use. So it is highly regulated, and it is a difference in regulation in the South versus the North. Another comparison I've seen it with chemical use and reporting.
And a variation of regulation from state to state.
Yep. Because in the South, it's just report what you did after the fact, and then there's a paper trail on what happened at that water body. But then in the North, you have to apply for permits before. You have to propose, and it has to be approved before you do it, and then a follow up with reports after.
You had mentioned in our notes, in our pre-call notes, about the North American Lake Management Society.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to touch on that? Looks like there's a conference coming up for anybody that's interested in November, and then I think you also said something like it's like that stormwater disconnect was starting to get a little bit smaller. The gap was starting to get a little bit smaller.
Yeah. So the North American Lake Management Society meeting is a large meeting full of the top lake managers in the country as well as Canada. Last year, there were people from Australia that showed up, but it's primarily, North American, so just this continent and the one above us. And it's a really great symposium to go to if you have the chance this year. I believe it's in South Lake Tahoe, so Nevada, California area, as well as a different plug that I didn't mention. I'm also a vice president for an organization called Women of Aquatics. And we have our annual retreat directly after NALMS in South Lake Tahoe. So that's an exciting week altogether for me. Yes, but I did register. I'm very excited to go. I was looking at the workshops, and there's an entire workshop for the whole day for stormwater for lake managers. And I was interested in a few other workshops, so I didn't choose that one, but I was very excited when I saw it because it really seems like there's going to be a shift more towards the inclusion of stormwater in lake management as a whole, and merging those two worlds that I know very well.
That's still wild to me that those two worlds need to be merged. But
And
so I'm glad
already
that
merged.
yeah, I'm glad to have you here. What was the name of that second event that follows up NALMS that you mentioned?
That was Women of Aquatics. It's
Women's
a
Aquatics. Okay, can you send me the link on that? I'd like to include it in the show notes. So if you get a chance, we'll include that in the show notes. Women of Aquatics.
Yeah, it was an
And
organization that came out of seeing women at all of these conferences, mainly as students like myself. And then once they graduate and go into the working world, we wouldn't see them anymore at conferences or, in the field. We just didn't know where they went. So it being a largely male dominated field, it's a group that tries to keep and support women in our industry.
Gotcha. I found your website, womenofaquatics.org, just like it sounds and spells .org. We'll link that in the show notes.
Great, thank you.
Very cool. Very cool. Marilla, you have any questions for Sonja?
so while we were talking about water quality being one of the biggest issues, is there anything that you specifically see from the stormwater coming into lakes and ponds that causes water quality issues?
I'm not sure in the inputs from stormwater, just because I haven't been too familiar with what's going on up here in the upper Midwest with stormwaters directly with lakes. However, in North Carolina, from my opinion, from what I saw, like water quality is huge. You can't just keep going to these same devices and treating them for algae and plants and nuking everything in the water body, because that's what the HOA manager wants you to do. That's what the salespeople want you to do. But it's a functioning ecosystem, and we are directly, mismanaging the water quality in these ponds for aesthetic purposes, in my own opinion, most of the time, because wetland plants are, functioning as a kidney of the earth kind of a thing, I guess. Removing nutrients, removing pollutants,
Yep.
and sequestering them.
Absolutely.
And it really stunk when you were required or asked to treat these beautiful beneficial plants, just because they didn't want to see them. So I see it in that part, in the stormwater part specifically, that's where water quality should be focused first, as that's a major input to lakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so stop trying to make your pond into a swimming pool, people. Some of that stuff's supposed to be in there.
Mhm.
What would you say, like, as we kind of wrap up, what would you say to anybody that has a pond, or may have a detention pond? I don't know if Tigris reaches national, or if you guys are just in different regional locations across the U.S., but maybe if you just gave some tips, or who they can reach out to, if everybody can reach out to you, or however you want to answer that question, if my
Yeah.
question even made any sense. But
Yeah.
but like the pond 101, I've got a pond, what you're saying sounds interesting, help me out, what can I do?
Yeah, so you can always reach out to me no matter where you are. I love having conversations about pond and lake management, so always feel free there. And we are a national company, so there's a number you can call and be directed towards, whoever's closest to you that could help. The biggest thing about having a pond and being a pond owner is just, again, being mindful of what inputs are going into your pond and where the water's coming from. When it rains really heavy, you should be out there seeing where the water comes from and what it's doing, as well as Google isn't always your friend. Something that I learned
Oh,
very early on is
oh,
if
shots
you
fired.
if you Google, about how to manage your pond, you will find the answer that you want, and you will find answers that you don't want. And as a homeowner, it's really confusing because everything will say something different and you don't know where to go. So I would say reach out to some companies near you and have some conversations, and go with your gut on the best relationship that you form, and who seems most knowledgeable and willing to help you out. There are plenty of online resources, but again, it's really good information and not so great information, and that's what the internet really excels at, is both sides of that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, that's a whole nother podcast.
It
Like
is.
that is not even an episode. That's going to be like a whole nother podcast. Yeah, but I'm with you. Mariella, did you have any other final questions for Sonia before I ask her if we forgot anything, and I just let her just get on her soapbox
Ramble.
and go crazy for the last few minutes?
I'm good. Just make sure we know how to direct people to get in touch with you.
Okay, yeah, I'll
So
give you all that
Yes.
information for your show notes for sure.
Yeah,
perfect.
LinkedIn I think is good. You're active on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so people can DM or DM you there. We'll have that. We'll have all those links in the show notes. Did I forget anything, Sonia? Anything on your heart that we didn't touch as far as what's going on in this great world of
Yeah,
clean water?
no, I was just really excited just to follow your guys' content and to have this conversation. And every time there's
And then I put you
anybody,
on the spot.
anytime there's ever
Podcast.
a question with like stormwater from my team, they send it to me because, I have the most experience, and I give them way more information than what they were looking for at the moment. So, yeah,
Yes.
I'm just super excited just to have an outlet to be able to ramble and share what I know.
Cool. Well, I think it's one of those deals where you just kind of got cranked up there, where you're now located. So this may be one of those, where you come back around and we rerun this, and a
I'll
year
give
from
an
now,
update.
and
Yeah.
we revisit. Um, Yeah, for sure. And then it looks like I was just checking it out. That Pond Girl podcast. We're gonna bring it back, everybody. We're putting Sonya on the spot in the midst of all the other things that she's got going on, trying to buy a house and get situated and get this new uh, job rolling in the right direction. But that Pond Girl podcast looks like you can listen to it anywhere, huh? Apple, Spotify,
Yeah,
Amazon Music. Is that correct?
that's correct. I'm
You
paying for it
it's a
every
blasted
month
out
for
there
you to
now.
listen.
I know, right? Yeah, yeah, I know that feeling. Yeah, so go check it out. And that is super cool. We appreciate you taking the time. It is nothing like turning a listener into a guest. I think that is amazing that you were willing to come on and visit with us. I think it's crazy that there's a disconnect. I mean, what's wrong? What's wrong with this out there, stormwater industry? What the heck? How can there be a disconnect between lake management and stormwater? Do better, all of us. Yeah, but we appreciate you bringing the subject to light and hopefully it creates some conversation out there in our stormwater world. So thank you so much for being part of the podcast.
Thank you so much for
So,
having me.
was there anything else that we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
Um, Not really. I was just I'm still kind of like, why is there such a big disconnect between
Yeah,
regulations in the Carolinas and then regulations up here? I mean, I'm sales and operations where I am, and it would be so much easier to sell these, corrective repairs to stormwater devices, but because it's not, regulated the same, nobody really cares up here versus down
yeah.
south.
I think that everybody's kind of been able to. I don't know. I don't know it in the nuance to, and people probably would argue to they would probably die on that hill, but there is difference in geography. I get that. There is some difference in, you know, the ground. I get that. But there's only so many variations of like infiltration and soil. And so like everybody is really good at just crying as far as I'm concerned that they're special. So they need so it's different for them. The only people that are special in my opinion is like, I don't know, Nevada. It doesn't rain in Nevada. Okay, you guys can be special. You can take your 4 inches of rain for the whole year. I get it. But in other areas, and I'm sure people would are going to just blast me for that. Like, oh, it is absolutely different. North Carolina is different than Texas. But at some point, and I think you would agree, we just got to have a baseline, right? Like it's got to be like everybody needs to get on the same page. Um, so so we quit killing fish, and
Hmm.
so the kids can go swim, and so that we can drink the water, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I don't know why it's so different everywhere. Like I said, we were just talking to a client before getting on this call with you about testing standards for devices. Like not only the regulations different, right? Like everything's different. Testing on devices is different. Regulations from state to state. It feels like interpretation of the regulations from city to city
Hmm.
becomes
Yeah.
different,
That's very
right?
much
Which
like
I mean, and
the
no, go ahead.
regulation from city to city. So I was in Charlotte, and then I had there was an office in Raleigh and an office in Wilmington, and like Raleigh was way more stringent than Charlotte's underneath it, and then Wilmington's like way down where it's more about aesthetics and less about devices at all.
Right.
Yeah.
We're just gonna, so long as it looks pretty, it
Hmm.
doesn't matter what's in it. Just so long as it looks okay. Oh my gosh. I'm glad we didn't start there. We shouldn't.
Yeah.
This podcast would have gone in such a different trajectory had we started there.
Yeah. So
We
if you
get
have a future guest that you can ask those questions to, um, that would be able to tell me why, or tell everybody why there's so many differences in regulation and compliance.
I mean,
I,
Mariella, you want to you do, I mean, I think we share some of the same opinions because we talk about it with our clients every day. But I don't.
I think that the people who could answer that are not going to come on here and give us answers.
That's what I was thinking too. It's like, 'cause so hey, if any of you regulators are out there who want to talk about it, I'll be nice.
Uh, And the other thing is, like so we have the Clean Water Act as our national standard, but we don't how it's interpreted and how it's enforced. Like you said, every state is different. Every county and every state is different. Every city and even in the same county. You were in Dallas, so we're in Texas. Dallas is different than Houston. Is different than Austin. So everybody thinks they're special, either more restrictive or less restrictive.
Hey, and I'm okay. I like states' rights, and I'm not big for like big federal mandates or whatnot. But I do believe in the electrical code. I mean, we were talking about electricity earlier. About I mean, like electricity doesn't care. It works one way, And so I believe in the electrical code. So why can't we just have some sort of baseline? And maybe I'm dumbing it down, which is something I'm very good at. But it just, I don't know, team common sense, folks, right? Let's just figure out a way for everybody to enjoy clean water. So, but man, you just created a whole nother episode. We'll be happy to have you on. You'll get another year under your belt, get yourself established there, and then you can come back and answer those questions on what you have found to be
Sounds great.
the answer. Or maybe in a year, maybe we'll make some forward progress, right? Maybe there'll be maybe
new
ASTM
developments.
will finally have snuck its way through and truly permeated the stormwater world. So,
hope so.
Who knows? Thank you again, though. I really appreciate you coming on, giving everybody something to think about and some information that they may not have had. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.